Sveiki visi, hi, my name is Aušra and I'm very happy to welcome you to my Litvak channel. I'm constantly traveling, visiting former Litvak shtetls, present Lithuanian towns. Today I'm in a former shtetl that name derives from the river's name is Tytuva, Tytuvos upelis in Lithuanian. Here you can see this rivulet. And the town is called Tytuvėnai or Tsytavian in Jewish, in Yiddish.
Tytuvenai was first mentioned in the 16th century. By 1555 a manor had been established here, and in 1594 a small town with several houses developed around the market square near the manor. The manor and town frequently changed owners. This didn't encourage the growth and prosperity of the town. In 1609 Tytuvėnai came into the possession of the nobleman Andriejus Valavičius, who, in order to perpetuate the memory of himself and his wife, invited Bernardine monks to settle in Tytuvėnai. He promised to provide them with land and funds and to build a church and monastery. First, a monastery was built. The church dedicated to the Holy Virgin Mary, Queen of Angels, was consecrated in 1635. With the arrival of the Bernardines, the town slowly began to grow. Tytuvėnai suffered heavily during the wars in the 17th and 18th centuries. In 1711, not a single resident remained in the town. A privilege granted in 1724, allowing the holding of regular markets, helped the settlement recover. By 1755, 18 families were living there. In the 19th century Tytuvėnai remained a small town. In 1833 it had just 35 wooden houses, 2 schools, a tavern, and a population of 137. It became an active center during the uprisings of 1831 and 1863. Following the suppression of the uprisings and on suspicion that the monks had participated, the monastery was closed in 1864. However, the church remained open. In 1868, Tytuvėnai was home to 753 residents. There were 138 residential buildings and a public school was operating. At the beginning of the 20th century, Tytuvėnai had a population of about 700. In 1915, during World War I, the front line passed through the area and the Bernardine Church and Monastery complex suffered heavy shelling damage. During the 30s and 40s of the 20th century, the town expanded and the population grew to around 1,300. Tytuvėnai gained recognition as a summer resort. Each year, about 500 vacationers would arrive to the town. The town development was disrupted by the Soviet occupation. Property was nationalized and political repressions began. At the beginning of World War II, the Jewish residents of Tytuvėnai were murdered. In the post-war years, partisan resistance took place in the surrounding areas and many members of the local intelligentsia were deported to Siberia. After the end of Stalinist repressions, the town slowly began to recover. A secondary school, an agricultural technical school, a hospital, and a peat processing enterprise were established. Tytuvėnai experienced a notable revival following the restoration of Lithuanian independence. Private shops, cafes were opened, and most formerly state-owned enterprises were privatized. In 1992, the Tytuvėnai Regional Park was established, encompassing 6 lakes, forest, and wetland areas. Today, Tytuvėnai is a quiet small town surrounded by beautiful nature. It is extremely popular among local tourists exploring religious, cultural, and historical sites in Lithuania. Okay, so this was the short overview of Tytuvėnai history, and now we entered the main square of Tytuvėnai. But before we continue, I just like to invite you to quickly see what's up in the church, the monastery yard.
It's quite calm in here, silent, but I hear that the mass is held now in the church. Not that many people, I would say. Nobody is in the church, in the monastery at the moment. Yeah. So our topic is not the monastery visit.
So we will leave the monastery and will continue to the main square, as our topic is the Jewish heritage of Tytuvėnai. While very popular among pilgrims, less Tytuvėnai is known for its Jewish history. Jews have been an integral part of Tytuvėnai since at least the early 19th century. By 1849, 30 Lithuanian and 40 Jewish families lived in the town. In 1897, Jews in Tytuvėnai made up 20% of total population, 329 people out of 1,300. In 1923, the town had 1,134 people, of whom 221 were Jews, or about 19%.
In the beginning, I want just to show you the beautiful monument dedicated to Sofia Riomerienė, famous female painter in the first half of the 20th century in Lithuania, and she also had some paintings related to Jewish life in small shtetl. The Jewish community being not very big, but still quite significant, talking about 20%, they were not very active in the public life of Tytuvėnai or Tsytavian. They lived in quite closed community.
The most of the buildings in Tytuvėnai are quite new, and there are a few houses, something like 9 or 10, that belonged to Jews or were somehow related to Jews. So during the tour I will try to show you at least some of them. There was no Jewish school in Tytuvėnai, so Jewish children attended the local Lithuanian school. During religious education lessons, Jewish children would leave the classroom and return only after the lesson was over. After school, they would attend their own religious education classes and study Hebrew. Though Jewish children did not actively participate in Christian religious lessons, the local priest would often praise the Jewish children who remained during the Christian lessons.
This is the school where Lithuanian and Jewish children would study together. About 8 kilometers following the street, just at the edge of Šiluva town, the limits of Šiluva town, there was a cemetery where Tytuvėnai Jews were burying their people. Tytuvėnai didn't have their Jewish cemetery, so they used Šiluva Jewish cemetery following this route. I will soon tell a little bit more about the crafts and trades what Jews were engaged in, but just before we continue, I wanted to show you this small house that belonged to a young Jew nicknamed Ilga Blauzdis, or Long Legs. He opened an ironmonger store here. He sold various items as horseshoes, nails, tin, buckets, and so on. The next building, the yellow one, is another old house. Before the Second World War, it was the house of the rabbi. From 1926 to 1937, prominent New York rabbi Yakov Kamenetsky worked in Tytuvėnai before his emigration. Rabbi Avraham Azriel Medin, the last Tytuvėnai rabbi, worked here since 1938.
He was murdered together with his community 3 years later. Before World War II, the Jewish population numbered around 200. They lived in the center of town, particularly along Kelmės, Šiluvos, and Basanavičių streets. Most Jewish homes were wooden, though a few were brick. Many homes had shops or small workshops, with food stores being especially common. The butcher shops were particularly notable, with meat being stored in ice houses. Ice was brought from the lake during winter. Leibas and Zulis, a local butcher, became well known for carrying meat on a sled through the streets in winter. He would offer the meat to people on credit, saying, "When you have it, you will give it back." His kindness and generosity made him a beloved figure in the town. His wife ran a fabric store with rolls of cloth neatly displayed on shelves. She was known for her excellent customer service and ability to sell on credit, ensuring that everyone could buy what they needed, even if they didn't have the money right away. One of the most respected persons in Tytuvėnai Jewish community was Dr. Baruch Chleiden. If a person came to him at night seeking help for a sick family member, he would never refuse. Sometimes he would stay up all night nursing the patient back to health. Chleiden was known for saving many lives, including those suffering from pneumonia and other diseases. Being a general practitioner, he treated a variety of illnesses and even attended births and treated skin diseases. His wife, Rachel, was a dentist who had her own dental practice. They had a little daughter, Aviva, whom they hired a Lithuanian woman to care for. Locals remember that the Chleiden family was generous, paying well for their maid and nanny and giving gifts to those who worked for them.
Doctor lived in this house. It is still existing, and you can see, and it was really remained abandoned for many years. But now it is under renovation. I'm not sure what's going to be established in this house. I know that the Tytuvėnai community wanted to establish a museum of Tytuvėnai history, maybe Jewish history also.
The market was held in the square every Wednesday. Let's imagine several hundred carriages gather, filling the space with bustling activity. The main buyers are Jewish craftsmen who come to purchase supplies for their trades. Bakers buy flour and eggs, butchers select cows, tailors are searching for fabric or thread. Townspeople also coming here to shop for their household needs. Yellow building on Basanavičių Street is also one of those surviving from the pre-war period. Feinstein brothers had a fabric store here.
This store looks like old style shop. We are entering some looks like a privately owned house. Let's see what we are going to see behind it. This is a barn with a garage. The family house yard, how the people presently live in Tytuvėnai. Tytuvėnai, as we pronounce it now. The garage. find here. It's a place, and this part of this house was the prayer house, the synagogue. It's called winter synagogue as it was heated. So the synagogue was built in the 19th century as a wooden one, but in 1938 it burned down, and soon after was built a new one. So now what we see, the part of it, this brick part, is former synagogue. For a few decades in the present Lithuanian independence, it served as a police office. Now I don't know, looks like the private house. The other synagogue was just a bit further. I will show you the place. And we are now just behind the market square, the main square. You can see that we are entering to the square, and we will now turn to the right on this Kelme street. There are some surviving Jewish houses. The yellow one with the beautiful corner porch belonged to Potter Kaplan. Pottery was quite typical craft in Tytuvėnai. Some potters, they lived a bit further on Pievo Street. You can see the houses a bit further in the horizon. So potters, they produced very beautiful ceramics of high quality. A bit lower, the green building that you can see on the left hand side, it belonged to Butcher Heim. A bit further there is another house, the yellow one on the right hand side. It also belonged to Butcher Lazurik. The lawn on the right side, so this was the side of the wooden synagogue, of the summer synagogue. Summer and winter synagogues, it's quite typical in the shtetls because it was quite expensive to heat the buildings. So in summertime they used the bigger wooden barn-like synagogue, and in wintertime the brick building would be used for.
Winter synagogue was here up on the hill, and slightly to the left the wooden one, the summer synagogue, stood.
So I will now walk this main street and later turn to the right and will head towards that forest that we can see a bit further on the right. This is the house of Lazurik. Yeah, so my microphone is off. I will try to speak something without it, so if it's too much noise, please forgive me. So I will continue walking this Kelme street that's behind me. No more old houses, part of those that I showed you survive. I am now heading turned into Ežero Street. Ežeros is the lake, so we are walking to the lakeside. Actually, we're not going to see the lakes themselves because they are a bit too far for this tour.
So I approached the intersection of Ežero Street and Pušyno Street. So Ežero, the Lake Street, that bring us to this pine forest. A bit further, this Pušyno Street, right ahead behind the pine trees, there is a Lake Gilus. So Tytuvėnai was quite famous retreat area where the Jews from the neighborhood towns like Kelmė, Šiauliai, Kaunas, they would come here for the whole summer to spend their summers in this Tytuvėnai forests. Every summer, Tytuvėnai had about 500 to 700 vacationers. Local Lithuanians rented out their houses off the street, often living in attics themselves. This house is the only one surviving from those times, and it is known as the Jewish vacationer rental house. The street further on was blocked off with a rising barrier to let the vacationers feel safe and quiet. Only Lithuanians were allowed to trade here. There were a few stalls selling milk, cheese, cottage cheese, berries, and fish. The weight of fish sold at the market had to be less than a kilogram, otherwise Jews wouldn't buy it. Berries had to be picked up far from the road. A summer restaurant was set up specifically for the Jewish vacationers where cold snacks were served. In addition, there was a chocolate and ice cream shop, and a temporary prayer house was established here in a separate building. Musicians and orchestras were invited to entertain the vacationers, holding concerts in the natural surroundings of the pine forests. These events were not limited to the Jewish visitors. All the residents of Tytuvėnai would gather for these community celebrations. Vacationers spent their time swimming in Lake Gilus and walking in the pine forests. However, this peaceful spot would later become tragical during the summer of 1941, when it turned into a cemetery for the local Jewish population. The German occupation in June 1941 brought radical changes to the Jewish community in Tytuvėnai as in any other town of Lithuania. One evening in late July, or according to some testimonies in the early days of August of 1941, the police chief of Tytuvėnai, Antanas Jurgaitis, ordered local policemen and members of the White Armbanders groups to arrest the town Jewish residents. Approximately 15 Jewish men were apprehended, grouped in fours, and marched to this forest. Upon arrival, the men were divided into two groups. The first group was taken into the forest and executed. About half an hour later, the second group was brought to the same site and also shot. Roughly a week after the execution of these men, the commandant of the Raseiniai Jewish ghetto, Grigaravičius, arrived in Tytuvėnai with 15 white armbanders from Raseiniai, and together with local collaborators, arrested all the remaining Jewish families in the town and confined them in the synagogue. The victims were then taken to the forest in 4 separate groups. Each group, consisting of around 40 people, was ordered to strip down to their underwear and enter a pre-dug pit. They were then executed. In total, 160 Jews were murdered in this manner. Local residents who had been mobilized to dig the pit waited nearby during the massacre and afterwards covered the bodies with soil. Before we go further, I want to show you one grave, a grave to a person. You already know about him. One member of Tytuvėnai Jewish community was murdered here. His name was Borokas Hveidanas. Dr. Hveidanas was not in the town on the mass murder day. He was visiting his patient in the nearby village. So he was not shot the day when all the men were shot, but he couldn't avoid the murder. He was begging not to kill him to save his life, but two Lithuanians of the same town, they simply killed him here. So he's laying here, and this is a small grave dedicated to him. His wife Rachel and baby daughter Aviva were killed together with Tytuvėnai Jewish women and children about a week later. You will never be forgotten. Well, it takes some time to walk to the mass murder sites, so I will speed up a little bit the video and will let you to enjoy the forest path until we reach some other graves. As you see, we are coming to one more grave. It is the grave of Tsalis and Zulis. Before the war, Leiba and Frida Senzulis lived in Tytuvėnai in Kelmė Street. They had a small farm and raised 10 children. The men of the family were skilled carpenters and made their living from the craft. Leiba, the father, passed away in 1938. But still in the community, all the Senzulis men were known as Leibukai, after their father's name. When the Nazis occupied Lithuania, the first mass execution in Tytuvėnai took place in late July, as you remember. That day, 15, or according to other resources, 19 young Jewish men were murdered. Among them were Leiba and Frida's eldest sons, Shmuel and Yitzhak. The youngest of their son, Tsalis and Zulis, was executed the following day in this forest. This is the grave of Tsalis and Zulis. One of his brothers, Joseph Leizers and Zulis, managed to survive the Holocaust. On the mass execution day, he was working in a nearby farm, and he was a carpenter, so worked as a carpenter in the neighborhood farm. And later, when he learned that Lithuanians are coming to hunt him, he evacuated. There were a couple of families from this area, from Tytuvėnai, that helped to survive him, and he survived the Holocaust. He later emigrated to Israel.
Here we came to the arrow. We call them Jenner poles. They show the direction and the distance to the mass grave. Our beautiful forests are full of this kind of small monuments, stelas, symbols of what happened more than 80 years ago in Lithuania. It says that the mass grave is 60 meters, so we will soon be there. We now came to the place that locals would call Šafirkalnis, or the hill of Shapiro. It is probably named according to the Dr. Shapiro. And so here we see the mass grave of women, elder people, and children that were killed here in August. We came to the last point of our virtual tour to Gečpive, the place where 15 Jewish men were killed in the end of July of 1941. September 24 is the day when Lithuania commemorates the Holocaust in our country. This is the day when Vilna Ghetto was liquidated in 1943. Every town, every former shtetl has their own Holocaust Memorial Day. So when their communities were killed, usually it happened in a day, a few days, or a couple of hours, that the whole community that might form from like 15-20% to even 75 or 80% of the whole town were simply killed. So Tytuvėnai has the day of July 25, when men of Tytuvenai were killed, and August 12, when women, children, and elderly people were murdered in Tytuvėnai. Most perpetrators were Lithuanians, and most of them were detained and imprisoned or killed by the Soviets. Some went to forest partisans and were killed in the fights against the Red Army. A couple of them
managed to emigrate to America and Canada and avoided the punishment. That is how the Tytuvėnai Jewish community ended. A few persons, Joseph Senzulis survived, and some other people who managed to evacuate before the war or somehow escape the ghettos, as some of Tytuvėnai Jews were imprisoned in Šiauliai ghetto. They somehow survived the ghettos and survived the Holocaust. After the war, they still lived in the Soviet Union, Soviet Lithuania, and later emigrated to Israel. I will have to mention also those people who helped Joseph Senzulis to survive. These are world righteous or among the nations, and also recognized by Lithuania. So they were brave people who helped a few Jewish neighbors to survive. That would probably be the end of the story. Of course, I wanted to have it more beautifully told, maybe better film, beautifully told. Still, I hope that you will like this video, that you will share among those who might be interested in Tytuvėnai, and I would also invite you to subscribe my channel to get some new videos, or maybe even online virtual tours that I am preparing to show you. So bye for now, and see you in my next videos.